Awesome. Good. And we are live. Just want to say a big welcome to Lawrence Grieve, one of the guys down in Queensland doing a lot of the natural bodybuilding shows over the 2020 period, and absolutely crushed it. I cannot believe how well it went for you, man. I was watching you from the first show. I was looking at the bodybuilding dietitians and stuff like that, and I saw your name coming up. Saw your first show, and from there, and I knew how just determined you were to keep going with it all. And look what happened. I can't believe it. Welcome, Lawrence, General Muscle. How are you?
Thank you. Honestly, mate, thank you so much for the kind words, and thank you very much for having me on today. Very exciting to be on a podcast and chatting all things bodybuilding, man. So thank you for having me on, and once again, thank you very much for the kind words. It was a bit of a surreal season, to be honest. It's definitely taken the last couple of weeks for it all to sink in a little bit, but honestly, I couldn't have been happier with the shows that we were able to do, and it was a bit of a dream come true this year, can't lie.
Yeah, and I bet that dream came a little bit earlier than even you were expecting. I think as bodybuilders, we amp ourselves up for the long run. We amp ourselves up for the 5-year goals, the 10-year goals, and
100%.
like what you're going to see when you're 30, 40 plus, because that's when a lot of people peak. But man, to take out 3 overalls in 3 consecutive shows, that's the dream, man. You're living. That's the dream.
I mean, but you've said it perfectly there, mate. Like, you kind of, especially younger guys in the sport in particular, especially relating to bodybuilding, when there's so much muscle density, so much muscle mass required, it is the sport of delayed gratification. And I was even talking to sort of like my friends and my coach about it. Like, I was very, very prepared to kind of only get to maybe 23 years old, 25, 27, to when you really start to see the fruits of your labor. And I mean, by that stage, could have already been doing this sport for a decade. So it's like, you really have to put in so much time before you even get to the point where you are being competitive, you are starting to hang out with the big guys. Even my coach said this year, like, we definitely ticked off a big goal of like getting overall titles earlier than expected. So once again, just absolutely wrapped with how it all went, man.
You must be feeling pretty good. And just for the audience now, how old are you right now, man?
I'm 20 years old right now.
20 years old, 3 overalls. For the audience, tell us a little bit more about what winning an overall title means in the sport of bodybuilding. So obviously you went through 3 separate shows, and there were different divisions as well, weren't they? Sorry, not different divisions.
Correct,
different. So you went through ICN, INBA.
Yep, so different federations.
That's the one.
Yep, and then, so basically, at a physique contest, you've got the categories. So you've got men's physique, men's fitness, bodybuilding, classic physique. So that's for the male side of things anyway. And then within each of those categories, you're going to have divisions. So for bodybuilding, I'll use my own example. The divisions might include stuff like juniors, masters, teens, first timers. They'll generally be a division based on your weight class. And then there'll be the open division, which normally gets split into heights depending on the number of competitors. So essentially, you enter your divisions. For me, this year, it was mainly the open classes, the weight classes, and the juniors. I was eligible to do the teens for the ICN, but unfortunately, due to numbers, that has to be scrapped, kind of as expected. The teen divisions are normally quite lean for bodybuilding anyway, just because not a lot of guys get into it super young. But anyway, if you win your division, then you go into what is called the overall. So at the end of the day, all of the division winners will go into the final class, and essentially the overall winner for the day is the best bodybuilder out of all those division winners, essentially sort of the best bodybuilder on the day. So that's what an overall title, I guess, means with respect to like a bodybuilding show.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And so we've only really, and you've only really spoken about the overall wins, but in each individual show, how many divisions did you actually go into? So you did like the teens, the height classes, as well as the open, and then got into the overall?
Yeah, so it was a bit varied. So for INBA, I did the juniors and the open class.
Yep.
So two divisions there. At ICN, I did my weight class. I was going to do teams, but it got scrapped on the day, so I didn't end up doing that. So I only did my weight class, my open class, and then the juniors again. And then the third federation that I competed with was NBA Australia. And I actually only ended up being able to do my open class that day because they structured their divisions a little bit differently. So they had more like a novice and a beginner's class. But because this is like my third year competing, I didn't meet that criteria. And once again, the numbers for the juniors were too low. So I actually only did one division and the overall at the NBA show, which was a little bit different to what I'm used to. Normally show days like a crazy day, heaps of divisions. But nevertheless, it was still a really, really good show and a really good day.
Yeah, man, can't believe it. And so obviously winning the overall, that means 3 separate shows and undefeated through every division.
That's right, man. Yeah.
Incredible, bro. Congrats once more. That is just...
No, thank you, mate. Thank you.
Really, really cool. So from there, obviously we saw how you went the year before, and which was your first or second competition?
So it was actually the season before, but actually 2 years prior. So I competed this year, obviously 2020. My previous season before that was 2018.
Yep.
And my first season before that was 2017. So
Gotcha.
This was my third competitive season. Very sort of similar breakdown of shows in my 2018 season. So I did the...
Beautiful. Sorry, man. I think we just missed you there. So we were talking about our last season comp prep in 2018. Yep. Go on.
Yeah. So basically, that would have been my second year competing. Well, my second competitive season. So I did 2017 for my first one, and then in 2018, I did a pretty similar run in shows. So the season B up in Queensland, where I did the Townsville Tropics. I did the Queensland State titles and then the World titles, which were on the Gold Coast that year, all for ICN as well.
Fantastic. And so I guess from here, when we look as far as comparison goes from last year, from 2018 shows to 2020 shows, obviously 2 years, that's a long time for someone who is completely dedicated for that entire 2 years. You know what I mean? You know, it's not a long time for some people who just are going through the motions, but when you have a plan and you're constantly looking at your life and how you can make, you know, your dream goal happen, that's a long time to get some results. So what did that look like for you? What did that 2 years mean for you? What was your mindset going into that 2020?
Yeah, so as soon as I got off stage in 2018, it was kind of like, okay, I know I'm going to do 2020. Like even before I had stopped the prep, I knew that I was going to be taking 2019 off to gain some size, because that was always the most apparent thing on stage. Like, especially going into the open divisions, like I would just stand there, and because I didn't have the size, I'd have to push for the conditioning. So we still got really lean in 2018, but it's kind of a double-edged sword because it's like you don't have the size to really stack up with the big boys. So you have to try to get really lean, but because you're pushing to get so lean, you're looking smaller. So it's just that's kind of the curse of like a junior or a teen bodybuilder, is that you're in that little weird stage for a while. But like you said, man, like even just taking one calendar year off, if you're really dedicated to this thing, that is so much time. And it just came down to trying to get really strong in the gym and trying to be a lot more intentional with progressing my lifts. I think that was a really, really big one. So actually starting to logbook my training and make sure that if I saw that a lift, if I was sort of achieving it, then I was actually pushing it up the next week and not just kind of letting myself chill in between and keep lifting the same weights week after week. Like actually important to force myself to progress. And another big game changer, I think, was just being a lot more consistent with my food. My first off season was like, as you know, when you first do a comp prep, the post-show period is quite a tricky period because the food focus is extremely high. You've never done it before. So I did get into some really bad habits in my first off season with food. But in that second off season, a little bit more experience, a little bit more knowledge, I just found I was eating a lot better and more consistently. And that sort of meant I could get my calories up to a much higher place, eating a lot of carbs, fueling my training, recovering really well. And not only is all that really valuable in the off season to fuel your performance, but then you enter your prep at a point where you can pull from more food from the get-go. And I think that was a really, really big thing for this prep, that we were pulling from 640 carb compared to 540 the year before. And it's really just simple maths when it comes down to it. Like, if you've got more to play with, you don't have to come down quite as low. And then you can keep more carbohydrates in the whole way through prep, which, all else being equal, is always a better thing, in my opinion.
I completely agree. And, you know, like you said, that the off season for a bodybuilder, if you really want to be competitive, and especially going forward, man, because as the research grows, as the, you know, the community and socials grow, and, you know, the sport itself gains some more recognition, and, you know, people are following, you know, you have to be on point. And that off season isn't for you to relax. It's not for you, not relax, but it's not for you to just not worry about it until you're 25 weeks out again. You know, that is building the foundation for what you're actually going to be able to achieve during that 25, 30 week prep, you know, for whatever that you do. But how you set it up in that off season, and how many calories you can bring yourself up to while still maintaining some sort of leanness, you know, how strong you can get your lifts, all of that, that's completely built in that off period that most people are relaxing and, you know, and not really following. And, you know, it's funny because, you know, coming out of my post show, I was a wreck, and in both shows. And it was funny because in the second show, halfway through, you know, I told myself, I know how bad it went the first time, which was basically I stepped off stage and then just gorged myself with food for 6 months. I told myself halfway through that I'm not going to let that happen again. You know, I feel really good this time. I changed around some of the foods that I was having, so I was enjoying it more, and, you know, everything like that. But as I got into those final couple of weeks where, you know, inevitably the calories have to come down, and, you know, you do get that diet fatigue, and just knowing that it's coming to an end, I think, is a big part of, you know, how you feel towards it. And yeah, funnily enough, similar thing happened, probably not to the same extent that it happened in the first show. But I still definitely did a lot of binging, you know, find it really hard to sort of stay motivated going forward. So from there, how do you, I guess, keep that mindset now? Do you still have it? Because you obviously now, we'll talk a little bit more about the cancelled show in just a bit. But now that your season has finished and you've done all of this, and I know, looking at you and hearing what you talk about, I know you're going to be competing again. So are you back in prep mode right at this minute? Like, are you on structured meals, everything going forward from right now? Are you giving yourself a little bit of leniency?
Yeah, so obviously there was a discussion with my coach this week, basically what our approach would be for this week. And we've kind of gone about it a little bit differently to how we normally would. So because we've already started reverse dieting, like, I already am starting to feel a little bit better. The food is coming up slightly. So we actually didn't make any changes to, like, our macros or anything for this week. But instead, we kind of just planned what my, I guess, like, post-show meals would kind of look like. Because in the past, the standard formula that we go with is like, okay, the night of the show, go out, enjoy yourself, have fun, whatever. And then the next day after the show, eat whatever you want, but have it like 3 square meals. So, like, have a nice breakfast, a nice lunch, a nice dinner. And then that's generally what we've gone with. And that's worked quite well in the past. Like, my first season, definitely overdid it, 100%. Like, felt sick that night. I actually remember that I ate so much at the show that I had, like, hoarded up through my prep that I was, like, too sick to actually enjoy my dinner with my girlfriend. Like, I was honestly, like, so disappointed in myself, and I thought, yeah, no, like, next year it'll be way better. And it was, but it was still like you still have that element of losing a bit of control. And, like, I definitely wasn't perfect with it. But for this year, what we've decided to do is just normal macros for the week. I've got my, one of my best mates has his 21st tomorrow night. So I'll be eating normal macros throughout the day, and then just having dinner out, and that will be like the off-plan meal. And then I'll be doing the same thing on Saturday night, but going out with my family. So it essentially would be like 2 dinners that will be off-plan this week. And then from Sunday, we'll go back to normal macros. And then from Monday next week, we'll just start to increase food. But I definitely, like you said, each season you kind of think, oh no, I'm way better this year. Like I think it's going to be all sweet. But this year in particular, the whole way through my prep, I have felt so much less food focused, so much less obsessed with like, oh, I want to eat this and I want to plan to go to this restaurant and tick off this food that I want to eat. That this year I'm like truly, I feel much more in control and much more confident that those 2 dinners this week are going to be enough for me. And I'm very, very confident that I'll just be able to just crack on and get back to work next week, because I feel like I'm in a very good mental space with it. And also there's just like, there's no need for me to go out of my way to do all that, because like when I really think about it, like I'm still on quite a decent amount of food. And because we've been able to reverse already, we can make quite a substantial jump and get food up to quite a decent place, even as soon as next week. So I think this will definitely be my best post-show period that I've had. But it's just a reminder to people, like that is something that I think even more so, like training aside, nutrition aside, like how you handle yourself in the post-show window is something that is just going to take time. Like you're never going to get it right the first time. And you just have to be patient with yourself, let yourself make the mistakes, and just trust that it will get better each time.
Yeah. And you probably, I think there's a small part of it in there as well, where I think, especially first show, you do need that little bit of gorging. You sort of need to not do it the right way to experience and to learn how bad it can really stuff you up. Because I remember, the edema, like just really bloated ankles in the, and knees and hips. I remember in the second show, my fiance, she made these millionaire shortbreads. And so it was just like a little bit of caramel chocolate. She made like 30 of them. And before anyone else even got a hand on them, like post show, they were all down. And I remember waking up the next day and like my stomach all along here was actually sore to the touch, like so much inflammation just overnight from just not taking care of yourself and doing the things that aren't right for you, but you just can't help yourself in that moment. And I think learning that and just realizing, especially once you've come down and you've been perfect for so long, just how, toxic sometimes that mindset and those type of foods in general can be to you. And it was a very big eye opener for me on like, well, I used to eat this stuff on like a day-to-day basis, without even thinking about it. And now I'm seeing the full repercussions and what it can actually do to inside the body. And it makes you really appreciate the journey a lot more, and, being able to keep that, that persistence and being able to just keep that eye on the goal. And I guess what I want to also mention on there, because, you said you're going out tonight for your mate's 21st and you're going to have, dinner with your family. Do you think I don't know how it really was, because you're in Queensland, I'm correct?
Correct. Yeah. I'm in Brisbane.
So your lockdown for COVID wasn't as severe as what something like Melbourne was. Almost
definitely not. Yeah.
Non-existent.
I have two of my best mates are actually in like the Melbourne vicinity at the moment, and like, yeah, definitely still sending my thoughts and prayers down there. I know it has recently gotten a lot better, but like, man,
it was
what you guys have to go through, like craziness.
It was huge, man. It was really, really, it was really big for a lot of people. And, that's why I really want to speak to that social pressure, because right at this minute, I over that time, I ran an 8-week challenge with the gym that I'm affiliated with. And, we had about 40, 50 members join in on that. And it was funny to see in that first 4 weeks, we were all still in lockdown, right? So, we couldn't go out, we couldn't go to the gym, we couldn't do anything. And, you couldn't really even see friends, it was just you and whoever was in your household was essentially your support system. And then obviously coached through online. But as soon as things started to open up, as soon as restaurants started to open, people were allowed to go back out, gyms were open and things like that, I saw a massive shift in the emotional side of things, and how people were sort of handling themselves. They went from getting amazing results in 4 weeks with actually having no assistance, no gym equipment, no one to sort of bounce off. When you were in your own head and you had that focus, you were able to achieve a lot. We had people losing a lot of weight, people just feeling really good, looking really good. And then once that social pressure came, or, oh, we can go out to dinner now, oh, we can do this now. I saw a lot of that change, and, then they started to feel like they were a bit of a victim again, to the circumstances. So how do you go about going out, so you're going out to your friend's 21st tomorrow night. Let's say you were still in prep. Let's say, you were going to be going for this final show that got cancelled. How would you have handled yourself there? Are you the type of person that takes a meal with you? Are you the type of person that can eat beforehand and then just say no to things? Or do you have like some sort of balance in there where you just, you track it, but you can eat whatever you want? How would you go about it?
Yeah. So I think, say a bit of a different story in prep. So off season, I think if you can eyeball the calories and not stress about it too much, like realistically, one meal where you're going out and enjoying it with your friends, like as long as you're not just saying, oh, screw it, I'm just going to eat like way over my calories and just not be concerned about any of the macronutrients. Like if you can just pick something that's got some veggies in it, got some protein in it, fits in your ballpark calories and macros, perfect. If it was at the start of prep, that's when I still will like go out for dinner and still can eat out. Generally, we cut that out at about like 8 weeks before the show. But even if I am doing that, like I try and order something as simple as possible. So steamed veggies with like some grilled fish, something that's just like really easy to eyeball, something that's not going to involve a lot of sauces, a lot of like dressings, add-ons, oils, that sort of thing. But it is still really important that if you're in prep and you're doing that sort of thing, leave yourself a buffering window. Overestimate, so that if anything, you're just giving yourself some leeway for those extra fats that could be included in the meal. But if say that I was still doing the national show, which was sort of just like about 3 weeks out from now-ish, obviously I wouldn't have been eating anything from the restaurant, but I would have no problem taking a meal with me. But it's kind of a bit of a balance, like because my mate and I actually spoke about it, and I said to him, hey man, like I know it's quite a nice place. I don't want to like upset the restaurant staff or the chef by like bringing my own food in. So like, would you like me to just eat before I come, and then I'll just chill and get a Pepsi Max and make some good conversation? Or I also would have been happy to take my own meal in there. Like it's really not something that phases me too much. And I think that if the people around you understand and actually support you in your goal, no one's going to bat an eyelid. So I wouldn't, it's all about like how you feel. Yes, it's important for you to be comfortable. But at the end of the day, it's kind of like, how important are these goals to you? Like if you're afraid that someone from across the restaurant is going to look at you and be like, why is he eating that out of a Tupperware? It kind of makes me question whether or not you care enough about why you're doing that. If those looks are really going to upset you or make you feel uncomfortable.
Man, I love that. I really, really love that. It's so true. And, you have to be able to be very confident in what you're doing. You have to actually be very, very precise on your goals and have a very strong understanding that you're doing these things because they are pushing you towards the end goal. And I think you're right in the sense that your friends and your social circle, I think they are the biggest influencers, because you want to impress them, you want to feel good around them, you want to feel supported. And sometimes along the way, because just like you and I, it hasn't been bodybuilding and weightlifting and things like that hasn't been something that's been in our life since age 2 when we started making friends. This is something that's come along the way, and we have friends from when we weren't that into it, or just from different versions of life that we've had, party scenes, going out when you were, when you just turned 18, all these little things. And trying to fit in with those people can make a massive, it can be very hard, because you start to feel guilty that you're changing, that you're a different person now. And, if you really respect what they think and they're not actually, they're not supportive of what you're doing, it's very hard to continue going and fight against what, you know, the people's opinions that you really appreciate and you really want. And if they're not really supportive of it, how are you meant to go on? You know, so
100%, mate.
the way that you're able to be honest with the people that, you know, you actually want to be around, and you can turn around to them and just say, look, this is where I'm at. This is what I need to do. You know, obviously I'm not going to try and step on your toes and, you know, make things uncomfortable at your own birthday, but, you know, this is just what I have to do. How do you want me to tackle it? That honesty is the only way to make it work, you know, with everyone in your life, family, mum, dad, brothers, sisters, you know, school friends, work colleagues, like that honesty. I'm just saying, look, this is what I'm doing. This is what I need to do for myself to make sure that I'm on the right path and I'm doing the things I need to. Where do we go from here? How can I make it easier for you as well?
100%. And I think the way that you framed it there is really important, because it's like, yes, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to reach my goals. That is the bottom line. But I'm also not going to be completely inconsiderate of the people around me in order to achieve that. So that's why you do ask those questions. Hey, are you happy for me to do this? Would you rather I do it the other way? Because when it comes down to it, whether or not I eat that meal out of a Tupperware in the restaurant, or whether or not I just have it at home before I come, does that affect me and my goals? No. But if I can show that person that I'm also trying to like work with them through it a little bit and be like, hey man, like, what do you think about this? And you just show people that you're willing to be honest, and you're not like stuck in your ways and like being this dogmatic bodybuilder of, no, I have to eat at this time out of this Tupperware with this spoon. If you can be a little bit flexible with people, they're going to be more inclined to support you along the way and be more understanding. And then ultimately you're just building a better relationship and a better attitude around like a contest prep and bodybuilding in general. And if the people around you look at it with a more positive light, they're going to be more supportive of it. And at the end of the day, like, as much as it is an individual sport, every successful bodybuilder will tell you that you do not do that. You do not do it alone. It's that simple. And the people who are trying to gut it out through a prep where they're isolating themselves, I just don't think you're ever going to be as successful, and you're not going to enjoy it as much. So if you don't take your friends, your family along the way, I just think it's not going to turn out as well as it could.
Yeah, I think that's more the thing, you know, like I know, like isolation, look, you know, we can't sugarcoat it. Bodybuilding is very lonely, you know, in the sense that you spend a lot of time in your own head. You spend a lot of time thinking about every calorie, every meal, every lift, every, you know, just, you know, your sleep, like you wake up thinking about it, you know, and you go to sleep thinking about it. So you spend a lot of time in your head, and it's very hard for people that aren't in that same mindset to accept that, you know, you, as much as you can be loving and there for other people and supportive, you care about yourself the most. You care about what's going into your body and out of your body and who you surround yourself with more than pretty much anything else on this planet. And isolation, you know, I think it can work to get a really good body. I think you can come out looking, you know, if you just cut everything else off and, you know, you sat there with your 6 meals a day in a cold, dark room and nothing but some iron, you know, I have no doubt that you'll probably get a pretty good body if you still have that mindset of, you know, just doing whatever it takes. But then the question becomes, well, was it worth it? You know, because how much do you actually miss out during that prepping period when you have that mindset of like, I'm not going to go out, I'm not going to go see this person because they're a bad influence, I'm not going to do this, and you put all these restrictions on yourself for, you know, anywhere up to 6 months to 12 months before a show. And you know, even if you get to the end and you jump up on stage and, you know, why? What do you really even feel at the end of that? You know, because there's no one there that actually was there to see you part of the journey. I think the best part for me was actually, you know, having my friends, my fiance Talia, my family, like at that show, because win or lose, like you feel like a champion, you know, and 100%. Yeah, so it's funny that people, and you know, it's been the dogma of bodybuilders, you know, where it's that, you know, that solitary style thinking, and I think it needs to change. And I think if we can sort of take a step back from that, because something I also want to talk to you about is like how much you think the bodybuilding lifestyle, should be implemented to everyday life, in people that aren't as, interested in lifting weights, but, the things that thinking like a bodybuilder produces and, that idea of, I guess, always trying to progress and always trying to grow. I personally think that it bleeds out into a lot of the rest of your life, and it gives you a lot of determination and willpower and, just power to do things outside of bodybuilding and, create businesses and create really, wholesome homes, where you feel like you're all doing the right things and on the same page. So do you think bodybuilding is for everyone? Do you think people should try and follow some of these principles? Or do you think it's something that is always going to be a niche?
I think that if we think about it, like bodybuilding itself, I think one of the massive positives is it can cultivate some really good characteristics within the individual. So if we think about doing stuff that you need to get done, even when you potentially don't feel like it, creating a really good structure. Like, I don't know about you, but when I get into, especially like the end of comp prep, I'm so organized. Like my days run like clockwork. Everything is just bang on. And a few times what actually has ended up happening is that when I'm in comp prep, I'm also like studying for exams and stuff like that at uni. And when I'm like in that mode, it's kind of just like, I can almost tell you what I'm doing at each hour of the day because everything is just so laid out and just moves so smoothly. So you've got elements like that, which are awesome. You become very organized, you become very disciplined. And I think especially a comp prep and bodybuilding, it really strengthens your character. And I stand by that. I've learned a lot about myself through each prep that I've done. But then when you think about like the side that it's a bit of give and take, because with bodybuilding also, like you said, comes that element of selfishness. And do I think that is necessarily something that a general population client would benefit from? No, because the only thing that warrants that selfishness is because the goal is so extreme. And the goal is to stand on stage at 7, 8, 6% body fat and look as muscular as you can. Whereas if you're not trying to achieve that, I think that someone would be better off maintaining more of a balance, maintaining more flexibility, and being able to enjoy their life more. Because, like, yes, we enjoy that. We enjoy getting on stage because that's what we're passionate about. But someone else might not really enjoy that. So having more flexibility, having a little bit more leeway is going to allow them to enjoy their lives more. So I think the general things that you can learn from bodybuilding, implementing the structure, the discipline, the work ethic, I think those are all great things that everyone can benefit from. But when it comes to like dropping the hammer in those last couple of weeks and obsessing over the finest details, I don't think that's warranted unless you're trying to take it to that extreme.
Yeah. And look, at the end of the day, no matter how big or small you are when you're trying to step up on stage, you want to win. In your mind, when before you even get into the venue, you're hoping for a win, even if you think it's completely impossible and you've seen the people that are going to be up there, you want it. And
that's one thing about this year that I found, once again, and my coach sort of like said, yeah, I see this a lot with competitors, is the more seasons you've done, the more it becomes of, yes, I want to improve. I want to beat last year's package, but like, you want to win. And like, I said that to him this year. I was like, yeah, man, like I'm stoked with the improvements we've made. Like, and I really just want to get up there and have my best physique, but like I want to win. Like, you work so hard and like you put in so many hours. And I think that's something that gets a little bit lost sometimes. People are like, no, it's just about chasing the physique. Like, there's nothing wrong with motivating yourself to be like, yes, I want to win. But it's just a fine balance between only like gauging your success on whether or not you get that trophy at the end of the day, and like just using that as a way to push yourself. And I think if you can kind of fall in between, wherever that happy medium is for you, that's perfect. But it's just, yeah, you don't want someone to be all the way across where the only way that they can define this season as a success is whether or not they have a first place trophy at the end of the day, when they still have made all that progress. But like I said, man, there's nothing wrong with going into a show being like, yeah, I want to win this thing.
Yeah, insane. That's what I want, like you're hoping to come out of there with a win. And, like you said, whatever happens on that stage on that day, you can't control, because it's individual people going up there to show what they've put in. Everyone put in that same amount of hard work, whether it was better or worse, whether their physique is better, whether they're leaner, everyone puts in the work to get up on stage. It's a mental and physical battle. But yeah, man, I think just being hungry for that, that recognition and that win is what drives you to do it, over 3 seasons, over 3 years, because especially when you don't take that win, in that first year, second year or whatever, it kills a lot of people, like I remember I did a lot better in my first show than I did in my second. I took out the juniors first in my first year and came third in the opens and the overalls. And then in the second show, I did the same teens. I was able to compete in it one more time and I came second. And then in the opens and overalls, I didn't even place. I was put right out to the sides. And that was devastating, man. Like I honestly, for a minute there, I didn't actually think I was going to compete again, because like, it's just, you just feel so far behind from the rest of the pack.
Yeah.
But if you can find that fire, if you can find that little something inside of you that makes you think it's possible, even if it is never possible, just like people who want to go to the moon and, be this and that, if you can just believe for a minute that it is possible, a lot of things can happen. And at the very least, you're going to fall somewhere along that path, and I think for most people, especially when it comes to, personal training and coaching other people who, just basically just want to lose some weight so they feel confident about themselves. I think a lot of people they struggle to even try, they think, because they get to a point where they think it's just either they think it's just not going to happen, or they think that the amount of work that they need to put in just isn't worth it. And I don't know. I struggle with that mentality when it comes to your health and fitness, because it's just that one thing that is not going anywhere. We're always going to have to eat, and we're always going to have your body, that those two things just aren't going to go anywhere. So if you can't take care of them, and you can't do what's right for them, then that's when you're going to see the problems like later on in life, when you hit your 40s and your 50s and your 80s, like that's when you feel it. And that's the thing I love about bodybuilding, because, we're as much as some of the ways that we achieve it aren't healthy, we are looking for a muscular and healthy life that's going to keep us in it for the long run. I think bodybuilders are, especially the natural bodybuilders, are some of the healthiest people on the planet.
Yeah, I agree. And like what you said there is perfect. I mean, if you look at bodybuilding as like you consider it in its entirety, generally in an off season, you can say bodybuilders are extremely healthy people, because what we're focusing on getting our fruits and veggies intake each day, drinking sufficient water, like ensuring that we're not sort of falling down in any micronutrients and supplementing those if we need to, eating sufficient protein, exercising 5 or 6 times a week. You know what I mean? Like
it's doing all the stuff that is in those national health and guidelines, like exactly. That's what I realized when I did my second show, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, hang on a minute, this is just literally everything that everyone's told us to do from the get-go. Now exactly. I'm actually doing it and stuff happens.
And it's like, yes, is the final 5 or 6 weeks of a contest prep healthy? No. But when, like, if you're doing natural bodybuilding, chances are you're only ducking into that realm, every other year? And the rest of the time, you're treating your body with the utmost respect, because you're trying to make progress for the next time you do that. So are there elements of bodybuilding that are unhealthy? Absolutely. But like I said, that is what is required for that specific amount of time to reach a goal that is very extreme. But if you look at the majority of the time, we're practicing very, very healthy habits. And I suppose the psychology of it and whether or not it's healthy is a different discussion altogether. But if you look at it from a physical health standpoint, I really don't see how you can say that bodybuilding is inherently an unhealthy sport, because a lot of things that we do are what dietitians and doctors and a lot of the sort of like health industry is wanting us to do anyway.
I agree, man. I completely agree. And I think it's going to become much more apparent in another 20, 30 years, when there is that such divide between, there's a lot, like I think gyms and the fitness industry in general is bigger than it ever has been. It's
Oh, yeah,
growing.
couldn't agree more.
So many people out there, so many influential people out there. Like, I'm
Mm,
always amazed at just how much free content there is for people to start
oh,
learning about this
it's
stuff. Like,
insane. Yeah.
95% of the stuff that I've started implementing on myself and seeing the results in is stuff from people that are just putting out this content just to help, not for it's
Yeah.
not courses, it's not anything else. It's just things that people want to just get across to the world, and
Mm.
it's out there. It's out there for anyone to listen, to watch, to read. And I think it's just going to become very apparent in the next 20, 30 years, the people that even if they weren't doing things perfect, and they weren't doing, they were just training once or twice a week, or they were only running, but they weren't doing like a lot of strength training, or, even if they're just picking a few things here and there, versus the people that just have zero respect for their body, like where they just treat it like shit and they eat like shit and they don't move and they know that they're doing it and they keep doing it anyway. And they're not happy with themselves for doing it, but they just don't know how to stop it. Like, I think that's going to become very apparent in the future, to just how important having some form of health and fitness regime is to just a healthy population.
No, I completely agree, mate. Completely agree.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit, because obviously, we're talking about, how natural bodybuilding in itself is inherently healthy. But I do want to talk about peak weeks, because, doing
Yep.
3 peak weeks, because for your shows, it was like literally weekend after weekend after weekend.
Yeah, 3 back-to-back weekends. Yeah,
Yeah.
it
So
was full
that's
on. Yeah,
3 consecutive peak weeks in a row.
yeah.
From the first peak week to the third, did much change? Or do you think you found like a little bit of a formula with your coach?
So we kept things very similar most of the way through. A big reason for that was because we weren't trying to make weight for everything. So in my 2018 season, there was one show where I needed to be under a certain weight limit. So that changed things quite a lot. But when you don't need to make weight, it is quite similar. So basically, leading into the first week, we did about 5 days of depleting. So we dropped calories, particularly from carbohydrates, right down. And whilst there's not a lot of evidence in the literature to really support this, like my coach in particular has seen a lot of anecdotal cases where just bringing things down for those last 5 days before you start to load up, it does kind of cause a bit of a super compensation effect. Yeah. And you tend to fill out a little bit more. But generally, throughout all of the peak weeks, we started with 2 high days on the Monday and Tuesday. Then we dropped carbs down a little bit for the Wednesday and Thursday, so a bit of a moderate day. And then we topped back up with a high day on the Friday. That was kind of in between where our Monday, Tuesday high day and Wednesday, Thursday moderate day was. So the only things that really changed across the board between the 3 peak weeks was we loaded carbs a little bit heavier in the 3rd peak week. So we bumped up carbs a fair bit because I was getting a little bit, yeah, well, I was getting a little bit leaner between shows, and Joey thought I could take them. And it was definitely sort of apparent that NBO show was like as full as I could have been, I think, without spilling over. But peak week's one of those things, man, where for a natural bodybuilder, it's really not that complicated. Like when you're talking about assisted guys where there's pharmaceuticals at play, where there's just so much more body weight and body water and body glycogen to deal with, that's when the intricacies surrounding fluid shift and potassium and sodium, that's when that does become really important. But on the natural realm, if you can just try to keep things simple as possible, like the whole way through for all 3 peak weeks, I had the same fluid intake and sodium intake every single day leading up into the show. And then, like, I always love, I'm sure you get this a lot as well. People are like, oh yeah, like when do you stop drinking water? And I'm like, oh yes.
I know where
you've
been hearing your stuff from.
Exactly. So like there was no changes to fluid, no changes to sodium. Keep food choices very simple. And I've often heard peak week, a lot of coaches say that it should be called don't F it up week. And I think that's absolutely spot on, because if you're not ready at like 2 or 3 weeks out, a peak week is not going to miraculously turn you from a 5th place bodybuilder to a 1st place bodybuilder.
Learned that
the peak week is just about exactly. So a peak week is just about not messing up, maintaining the look that you already have, and just putting that few extra percent that comes with a few extra carbohydrates, some little manipulations to fluid and sodium, and potentially just a week of training that's a little bit easier on the legs and a little bit more focused towards like filling up the top half. Keep it simple, man. That's what Joey and I have done for all of our peak weeks across all of our shows. And I dare say that's probably, I think we've found a really, really good formula that works well for me at the moment. So that will definitely be data that we'll keep from this year, take that into future seasons as well.
As you should, man. For 3 overalls, it's obviously worked something. You know, I think as well, I like to really emphasize on the predictability in that last week, you know, on just how, you know, like, you know, with your meal timings, with how much water you're drinking. It's not that there's, you know, these crazy things that, you know, can happen when you stuff around with them too much. I mean, like, obviously crazy things can happen but like just keeping it steady. You know, keeping your fluid intake steady, keeping your sodium intake steady, keeping your workouts the same, keeping your steps the same, you know, like allowing your body to understand that there is a routine here, and it can feel, you can relax knowing that things are working the way that they're meant to. And you're just riding this train of like, everything is, you know, everything is as it should be. Because yeah, like you said, man, when you start mucking around with water and sodium and stuff like that, you can change the way your body looks pretty quickly, you know, down 1.5 liters of water, you know, and you can see the differences, you know, almost instantly, especially when you're that lean. And I'm glad that you brought that up. On peak week will only show those, you know, those 2%, 5% differences when you're ready. And when you're actually, you know, when you are lean enough in the first place. If you don't have those striations and you don't have those cuts to begin with, no amount of dehydration, no amount of, you know, sodium loading is going to make them just pop out of nowhere. You know, you have to work for them through that consistent dieting and fat loss period for the 24 weeks before, so that, you know, it actually has somewhere to go. And when you're doing all these finer little tunings, you know, it's funny. It's because I realize this, in my off seasons, you know, I tend to put on a lot of weight back on very quickly. I live most of my life being quite fluffy, watery, you know, just, I don't carry a lot of cuts. And so when you get down to those final 7-8 weeks and you really can start to see the lines and see everything like that, it is incredible, you know, just how much, you know, missing one meal can, you know, change not just your physique, but, you know, how you feel as well, you know, like, and how you actually feel going into a workout, or, you know, how well you sleep that night. You know, every little decision becomes more crucial. And so when you're down at that weight, it's much better to find what has been working for the last 12, 16 weeks for yourself and keeping it that way, rather than just taking this random, you know, shot in the air and hoping that it works.
No, couldn't agree more, mate. I definitely see that. Like, one thing that I see a lot on social media is it's like, okay, cool, peak weeks here. We've just spent like the last 8 weeks really digging. Now we have a bit more food. So everyone's trying to incorporate all these treats and all these snacks, and just completely changing the food sources from what they've been having and what their body's been used to for the last 8 weeks. And then you wonder why you've got looking watery and got all this weird fluid shift, because like you haven't kept things consistent. So like, I try to say to people, just keep your meal choices the same. Like, do what you've been doing for the last 20 weeks. It's been working. It's gotten you this far. Just push through. Just do that last little bit. Keep it simple. And I know you mentioned stress as well, and I think that's also a really, really big one. Like, I laugh because Joey, on every peak week, like when he sends me the plan for the week, he has like his little like generic notes that he like always puts in for all his clients, just as reminders. And one of them is like, try to stay relaxed and like as stress-free as you can. And it's so important just to kind of like try chill out, try not get yourself in stressful situations and just like let the body do its thing, let the week run its course. Because I think it's the people who are overthinking. Trust the process, mate. One of my favorite sayings that, and just like let the body do its thing, listen to your coach, tick all the little boxes. And if you can do that, and if you can follow the plan, when you're standing up there on show day, you're probably going to be looking your best or as best as you could have.
Going through there. Could not agree more. Well, look, you've obviously found a nice little formula for yourself in the peak weeks. So, you know, taking another year off, 2 years off to gain some even more mass and being able to repeat this process, you know, it's going to be very exciting to watch. You're going to be one.
Thank you, mate. Thank you.
Do you reckon
I'm really excited too.
Do you reckon you'll come down to competing down in Vic?
Mate, 100%. Like, well, the national show in 2018, I remember that was down in Melbourne. And the only reason that I didn't go down is because it interfered like with uni at the time. And because I had already, as you know, bodybuilding is not a cheap sport. So paying another set of flights, another set of accommodation just wasn't really going to work out for me financially. So I actually ended up giving that a miss. But man, whenever I see the photos from those Melbourne national shows, they just look insane. So I'm really hoping that during my next competitive season, I'm really hoping that the nationals for that year is down in Melbourne, because I'd love to come down. I've actually never been to the city itself before, and I really, really want to just visit in general. So a couple of reasons why I really want to get down there. So if we could do a bodybuilding show, can tick all those boxes, kill all those birds with one stone.
Yeah, like see, I've been thinking going the opposite. I want to go and compete up in Queensland. Like, you know, looking up there, it looks like a really good vibes, you know?
Yeah, mate. Like, definitely, like, obviously the state show is awesome. Jason, he's the president of ICN Queensland, his shows that he runs are just insane. But also like the Tropics show, normally it's a little bit of a smaller show because it's the first one for the season. But getting up to Townsville and a little bit more north of Brisbane, the beaches are beautiful, the weather's awesome. So yeah, you can definitely make a nice little time of it up here above the border, mate. So definitely do scope one of those out for one of your seasons.
Yeah, we'll be looking into that, I think. All right, man. Look, we'll start to wrap it up a little bit. I do want to get a little bit more information on like food choices, because I see a shit ton of Weet Bix up in that diet.
The Weet Bix has actually fallen away a little bit, I must say. So like, I do have that whole like Weet Bix cult thing that I was running for a while. But I think I actually ended up not being able to eat as much of it in my off season, just because it is quite like fibrous, and as the carbs kept coming up, it was almost like just getting a bit too much for my gastric intestinal system to get down all of those Weet Bix. But at the moment, mate, the Milo cereal is the cereal of choice. So if I had to recommend one, that's probably my favorite at the moment.
I like that. Okay. So what else? So like, I'm assuming it's anywhere between like 4 to 6 meals for yourself most days. Like, would you say working 4? Beautiful. So working with your coach, is he more of a, look, these are the macros for the week, work it out? Does he give you like a specific food plan that he wants you to follow? How do you go about like sorting out what foods you're going to use?
Yeah, just macros. So like Joey's obviously, especially by now, like early on, like I was kind of like, oh, I've got these macros, I don't know what to eat, like, because I just hadn't really established those patterns now. But yeah, he doesn't advise me on any food choices. He knows that I'm kind of at the level where I can make those sensible decisions. So like a very standard day is I normally train first thing. So I'll have my Milo cereal with a bit of fruit in the morning, and I'll throw a whey protein isolate shake over the top of that, and that will be my pre-workout meal. Intra-workout, I'll have some EAAs with some intra-workout carbohydrates. So like not really a meal, but obviously it all adds up. Post-workout will normally be like some rice cakes with maybe another piece of fruit, and then I'll have like cottage cheese generally as my protein source. And then meal 3 normally ends up being a bit of veggies at the moment. It's like coleslaw, just because it's a little bit more satiating at the moment. And then I'll have that with white rice and some sort of protein source, tuna, chicken, kangaroo, something like that.
Whatever you got.
And then, yeah, exactly, whatever's lying around. And then dinner will pretty much be my main like vegetable intake for the day. So that's when I'll have my stack of veggies, generally kangaroo again with dinner, and then a carbohydrate source. So at the moment, still using like charisma potatoes, once again, just for a little bit more volume, a little bit more satiation. But I dare say in the coming weeks, that will sort of transition to be another rice or couscous meal, just because I'm probably not going to see the need to load up on all those potatoes as carbohydrates come up.
Wow, man, that sounds like it. The cool thing with, you know, something like that, and then knowing, you know, because I think a lot of people would hear that and they would sort of think like, wow, it's actually, you know, it's not a crazy amount, you know, and even if you were to like be in the off season, would you keep the 4 meals? Like, would you keep the 4 meals and bulk them up a bit, or are you the type of person that would add in a 5th?
Yeah, so the thing is, like, I understand like the rationale for guys eating 5, 6, 7 meals a day. But for me, like the way my day is laid out, like the 4 meals just like slots in really well. And I'm sort of one of those people where like I'd rather just have a bigger meal and eat 4 times a day. Yep. And basically we know from the research that if you're getting 4 evenly spaced protein spikes throughout the day, you're already sort of maximizing the protein side of things.
You're getting the most
99% of the way, you know what I mean? So that's what I aim for, 3 to 4 protein feedings, try to distribute my carbs relatively evenly between those. And yeah, like that's the thing. If all goes to plan, carbohydrates will probably be the highest they've ever been by the end of this off season. Like we should be able to work them up higher again. If that means I might just need to have like a pre-bed meal where I get in a few extra carbs, or if I just try and bulk up each meal, it probably will mean bulking up meals 2, 3, or 4, just because you can't keep adding carbohydrates to that pre-workout meal. You're going to get to a point where you're just like way too full to train. But yeah, it's just, I do have quite a good appetite. Like I can eat pretty well. So I don't see myself needing to add in that 5th meal. It'll just be about being smart, utilizing some lower volume choices. Like one thing I've actually bought recently is some cream of rice, which is like a lot of the guys like in the UK in particular get around it. So I thought, oh, I'll give it a whirl. Especially in the off season, I think that will be a good option to keep like the food volume and fiber in particularly on the lower side, whilst still trying to like make sure I hit my carbs and that sort of thing, especially when they do start getting up there.
Have you tasted it yet?
Mate, I'm actually making it for the first time today.
Oof, you'll have to tell me how it goes. You're right, man. I see a lot of guys using it, and looking at it, I'm like, I'm not too sure.
There's a trick to it though. Like, I think it takes a couple runs till you like make it well. So today is going to be the first attempt. So it's going to be interesting. We'll see how we go.
Oh, I'm excited, man. I'm excited. Yeah, I mean, look, it's cool with, you know, with your food that you're able to use such a diverse range of foods. You know, like it doesn't sound like you're sort of going around the thing a lot, but you're keeping fruits in, which I know has a fair bit of dogma behind it in the bodybuilding world, especially going back a few years. You know, I have been able to eat stuff like cereal and things like that as well, and get to where you did. Like, you know, it's just cool. And I think it's really going to be changing. It's going to change the literature and the research on what we know about bodybuilders. And there's so many athletes and coaches that, you know, are trying to do that right at the minute, but it's hard when, you know, something like bodybuilding has been around for, you know, over 100 years, and we got very, very used to a certain lifestyle and a certain way of thinking, you know, through the Arnie period and through all of that, where, you know, you just hear these little snippets of what they say, you know, like just eat chicken and broccoli and rice and whatever. And you hear it, and then it becomes the norm. It becomes the only way to do things. And if you're not doing it that way, you're falling behind. And looking at you, man, being able to take out 3 shows in a row, being able to sort of, you know, try these different methods and do things in a way that actually supports you. Like you are making bodybuilding fit your life. You're not trying to fit into bodybuilding, and it's showing. You know, you're able to get to these levels of leanness, still keep some sort of head about you, you know, and not just completely fall off the rails and get all emotional and things like that, which I see a lot of.
Yeah,
You know, you're being able to just stay on track, keep the course, you know, doing it in a way that actually is sustainable, for one, which is the most important thing. You know, the fact that you can come out of a show, post show, and immediately, you know, stick to Cal's again and do your diet and not waver. You know, it says a lot about how you're doing things, because I think a lot of people that do get that binge at the end is, you know, you were doing it in a way that wasn't natural to you, you know, and if you're not doing it in a way
sure.
that's natural to you, then is it the best way? You know, it has to
Yeah,
feel good for you.
completely agree. And I think there's a lot of people who are starting to understand that more now. Like obviously, as you know, the bodybuilding dietitians, Jack and Tierra, like they're putting out some awesome content. And I think it's really cool to hear people with qualifications like in dietetics explaining that you should not be sacrificing your fruit and vegetable intake. Because I mean, like Jack, his carbs get just absurdly high in the off season,
I can't
but
believe
that
it.
man will still sit down with his big bowl of veggies, add pasta at the end of the night and get it down because he knows how important those micronutrients are. And like Tierra eats about 1 million pieces of fruit a day and it's outrageous. But like look at them. They've both made amazing products. They've both progressed. They're both incredible physique athletes and they take care of their health as well as being able to progress their physiques. And I just think like
Not
that
only
sort of
that, man,
thinking
just
is
being
going
able
to be
to,
the new age.
yeah, and not only that,
Yeah,
just them actually being able to produce results for other people as well using these principles. You know,
exactly.
they're creating
Exactly.
some awesome people, you know, that are stepping up on stage, and that says something, because when you're coaching someone else and they're essentially following everything you're doing, it's your principles on the line. It's what you're, you know, preaching. And even if they weren't following it, it's still how you're delivering that service that's all about it. So yeah, man, the way that they're attacking their nutrition, you know, how they're writing up their plans has to be doing something right. And it's good that it's going against the
Absolutely.
grain a little bit, because, you know, or else if it doesn't get challenged, it'll never change.
Yep. Completely agree.
Yeah. So look, man, let's finish this off. I obviously, as I was saying before, I am running an 8-week challenge at the moment, and this is the final week. They're going to be taking their photos on Sunday. And look,
Yeah.
for me personally, like it's not about how much weight you can lose in a challenge. It's not about you know, even how much muscle you can put on. It's about how much you can change. You know, for some people, it's a mental change. You know, I had a lot of people in there that just the lockdown in Melbourne hit them extremely hard. You know, and they just needed something to help them keep accountable, to stay on track, to have someone to answer to when they're not doing what they know they need to do. You know, and have been able to transform in that way, even if it's not transferring in the way of the physique just yet. You know, so number one, I want to know from yourself, how is the best way to take check-in photos? So like
Okay.
how, you know, what's important to make sure when when you're trying to see progress, because, you know, I see a lot of people, they just stand there like this, and then they do the side, and then they do the back. And, you know, it's very hard to sort of see changes and progress in the physique when, you know, there's zero flexion, there's zero sort of intent to the photo. So I want to know a little bit more about how you go about taking your photos to make sure you can see week to week progress. Um,
Yep.
and I've already asked about the social pressure. So yeah, let's just talk about the check-in photos.
Yeah. So obviously it'll be very different. So like when I take my check-in photos, I'm going through all like my quarter turns, symmetry, and like my muscularity shots.
Mm-hmm.
But just in general, I think for a Gen Pop client, I think it might be a good idea just to kind of like let them pick almost like just
Their favorite.
poses in a sense, even if it's just like standing up and just like kind of flexing a little bit, just so that you can see if like you're seeing a few more lines, seeing a few more veins, just picking the duck from a few different positions, a couple from the front, a couple from the back, maybe a few from the side. But I think it's more just like being consistent with how you take them. So find a spot in your house which has good, natural, honest lighting. Generally, I like to go about it so that you've got the light source, then the camera, then yourself. So you've got the light coming onto you from behind the camera, essentially. And I think if you can take photos like that, very consistent, yes, it is tempting to get underneath some downlight, see a few more lines, see a little bit more separation. But if you can take photos like that in honest lighting, you're going to see progress. And then potentially maybe you've got a photo shoot coming up. Maybe you are stepping on stage. Like, that's always when it's going to look even better. So my coach always says, if you look good in bad lighting, just imagine how you're going to look in good lighting. So keep your check-in photos nice and consistent, same light source, same time of day if you can. And the other important thing is, like, generally first thing in the morning, like with no food, no water, I just find if you can control as many variables as possible, that's going to allow you to gauge the progress in the most accurate way.
100%. Yeah. Love everything you said there. I think with especially Gen Pop clients, because, it's tough. And at the end of the day, like, there's a couple of different types of people that join something like an 8-week challenge, something like that. It's not as much bodybuilding, but like, if it's just a challenge to, help people lose weight or gain muscle or whatever their goal is, a lot of those people who decide to join that do not like their body all that much. They find it very hard to actually look in the mirror and, look at their bodies objectively. And one of the things I've been saying, and pumping into their heads is, you need to be critical, not emotional. So you need to be able to look at your body and, number one, celebrate progress, even if it's a tiny little bit, even if you see like one little line just underneath the chest, even if your biceps just feel really tight today when you take your photos, that needs to be celebrated, number one, because if you can't even be happy about the small progress, then you're never going to even get to the big progress,
Exactly.
And number two, you need to be able to look and see what needs to be improved, so have a look and say like, yeah, look, I still have some belly fat that needs to go, or I've still got some, areas on the lower back that's just not coming in the way I want to, and be critical about it, but not allowing the emotions of that to then just, change what you're doing at the moment. Because once you start mucking around and looking at those each individual markers and then doing things to get better at those individual markers without looking at the big picture, I think that's where people get a little bit, it gets hard to follow, and it gets hard to sort of stay on track when you're constantly trying to just, you're getting emotional about these tiny little things.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's also where not trying to focus on little individual markers of progress is really important. And that's, you would have heard it 1,000 times. That's like the whole thing with the scale, is that people are putting all of their eggs into this basket based on a number. And that's why it's really important, I think, have your check-in photos, have your scale weight, have some body girth measurements, but then also just think about stuff like, how are you looking in the mirror? How do you look with a pump? How are the clothes fitting? Like, little stuff like that it also counts for something. Yes, maybe we can't assign a specific metric to it, but it all adds up to the overall picture of whether or not you're moving closer towards your goals. So I think it all kind of needs to be considered, and don't fixate on one specific variable.
Absolutely. And just being able to look at every single one of those factors, and, knowing that you're looking better, like while you're training, or, after you eat big meals and things like that. Like I said, man, celebrating those things and actually, looking at it in a positive light and using that as motivation to get the next thing, and constant, it's a little bit of that, like, it's gratitude and optimism, it's actually looking at those little things and saying, wow, if I can do that, then I can do this. And then doing that, and then being able to get there and be like, wow, if I can do that, I can do this, and like,
Exactly.
that's exactly what you're doing now. You've finished these 3 shows, you've taken out the overalls. Unfortunately, they didn't award out pro cards.
So, like, being completely honest with you, the INBA show, which was the first show that I did, we were told that the overall winners would be offered a pro card if the judges deemed that they were of like a sufficient quality. Obviously, I was not offered one, and that's totally fine with me, because if I realistically look at my physique, do I think I'd be competitive standing on a pro stage? Absolutely not. So I've got absolutely no qualms with that decision. I agree with that decision. And like I've said to a lot of people who have sort of asked me, oh, were you a bit like, why didn't you get a pro card, da, 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 kind of like, would a pro card be cool? Yes. Would it change anything about my approach to bodybuilding?
It'd be cool to throw on socials and then that's exactly it. Like, because you'd be stepping up on those pro stages just feeling like you did back in 2017.
exactly. So it's a huge goal of mine. I want to be an ICN pro one day, and like I'm not sort of shy to say I know it will happen. I will make it happen, but when it happens, I don't mind too much. Like it's not going to change my life. It's not like I'm going to drop out of my degree and become a full-time bodybuilder. So
And not
whenever it
just that,
happens, it
man.
happens.
I think the massive thing with you and, myself is, I'm still trying to learn is like, you love the journey.
Exactly, man.
You love the process
100%.
of becoming a pro. You don't love the idea of being a pro. You love the idea of that journey, going along and doing the training and eating, for years and years and years, and knowing how long it takes and how much dedication you put into it to then get the pro card. You love this bit, where you're at
Exactly.
right now. You're actually enjoying it and want to be here. You're not looking to end the chapter like just yet. And I think
Exactly. And I mean, one day when it happens, you stand on stage, they give you that little pro card, you get your trophy in your hand. That moment will be awesome. And I can't wait for that moment. But that moment will be temporary. The satisfaction will come from me looking back and thinking all those years, all the meals, all the training sessions, all the steps, all the dedication that it took me to get to that point. That's what I'm going to look back on and be like, that's what it's for. Like, that's what it's about. And I just think, yeah, the little moments on stage are great, but it's the journey along the way. Like, that's what I love about this sport.
it's that reflection, it's being able to look back and just be like, wow, like I put a lot on the line for this. I gave up a lot of things. I gave up a lot of that social stuff that you used to do. I gave up a lot of foods that I do love and enjoy. I gave up a lot of time to train day in, day out, and, say no to a lot of things that I would have normally said yes if I wasn't doing this. But yeah, when you get to the end, and you will, I know you will, it's going to be worth it. It's going to be sick.
No, thank you, man.
And hopefully
It's gonna be good.
hopefully you and me will meet on stage soon, my man. I think,
Mate,
look,
I hope so.
I think it's
I
going
hope
to
so.
happen.
I think it will. Yeah, I'm not too sure, obviously, what your plans for competing are, but my next season will be 2023. So if that lines up, mate, who knows?
Okay, nice.
Yeah, so we'll take a bit of time off.
Gives me some
I've got
time, which I'm going to need.
yeah, well, we've got some pretty busy years sort of with like other life stuff coming up. So I think the next 2 years are going to be good ones to not necessarily compound life stress with a contest prep. And also, man, need more time to grow, need more time to get bigger. So it's going to be good. I'm very excited.
I love it, man. Last question for the day. For everyone listening, for my 8-week challenge, guys, if you got one piece of advice for them to become the strongest versions of themselves, to be the happiest, to be the strongest, to look their best, feel their best, what would you tell them? How have you gotten to where you are right now? What do you think some advice for them?
I think for me, the biggest one, maybe be a little bit of a two-parter. So the first one is often when I get asked, like, what keeps you motivated? What keeps you in the gym when you don't feel like it? Is I say to people, my why is strong enough. And I stand behind that 100%, because if you want something bad enough, and yes, this sounds cliche, but if you truly in your heart of hearts are chasing a goal that you feel so passionate about, the work is almost irrelevant. You will do what you need to do to get there. And will there be days where that work feels a little bit harder? Yes, because that's what happens. We get tired. Sometimes you might not feel like it. But if your why is strong enough, ultimately that will carry you through. So I think having a strong reason of why you're doing something, and not just like, yeah, I want to look better, but like, what does it mean to you? Is this about improving your health so that you're able to like live a more active and healthier life so that you can be there to play with your grandchildren or be more active with your kids? It can be stuff like that as well. So I think the why of why you're doing something is really important. And the other big one that has really been made apparent to me this year is surround yourself with people who support you and who push you and who make you better. Like, surround yourself with winners and keep your circle full of people who you want to be like. And I think that's a massive, massive thing, because even just reflecting on previous contest preps, I remember when I was like in high school doing my first prep, and the people in my circle were, now in hindsight, I realize not as good as they could have been, because I had people at parties giving me a hard time for not drinking, like getting on my case about having to leave early because I have to train in the morning, telling me, oh man, come on, just eat that. Like, why do you have to bring your own food? Like that, these are literally things that people said to me.
Oh,
These were my people in my circle.
One of the most common things. Like that is the
Yeah.
normal, that is like the normal mindset of general population. Yeah. It doesn't, the things you're doing just don't make sense to them.
And now I look at this contest prep and I've got people in my circle, like my best mate, ringing up the restaurant and being like, and seeing if it's okay for me to take a meal there. I've got my girlfriend offering to get up at 5 a.m. to take my check-in photos. Like those are like, I mean, straight off the bat, those are just two people. Like I've got my mum, like this is one thing, like it's super cool. Like I will write up the quantities of the food that I need for dinner. And if I'm out, my mum will weigh out that food and make my meal. And then I know that it is tracked to the gram. Like those are like three people just straight off the bat that are in my circle that I could not have done this prep without them. You know what I mean? So it's like, surround yourself with people who are going to do that for you. And as brutal as it might sound, don't waste your time with people who aren't going to do things that are going to help you to be better. Because when people do stuff like that for me, that also makes me like, yes, I want to help them. I want to help them become better versions of themselves. And then you end up just like building and cultivating this awesome group of people who all just make everyone better. And at the end of the day, like that's what it's about in my eyes anyway.
Man, that is the truest thing you said all day. You know, it really is the people around you that make it. It's the people around you that make it worth it, you know, that actually makes it worth going through stuff like this. And it's the people that make it as well. You know, it's the people that, you know, will cook your damn meals, man. You're getting meals. That's incredible.
Mate,
you know, like
kiss your mum on the cheek when you go home tonight, all of you out there. We don't deserve mothers. And we don't deserve girlfriends who put up with our moods and get up at 5 a.m. to take our progress images. That's for sure.
Man, it's so important. And like, you know, this is like a last note, even with myself, I still remember going through, you know, it was probably about 4 weeks out at the time and I wasn't really happy with how I was looking. And I just remember nearly about to get in the shower. I was looking at myself in the mirror, butt naked. And I just looked at myself and I literally just started crying, man. I was just like, I don't know what, I don't think I can do this. I don't think I can step up on stage looking like this. It's just not where it needs to be. And she was able to look me in the eye and say, you've got this, don't stress, you know, just keep following the process. 4 weeks is a long time, just get through it. And it happens, you know, and you do it. And, you know, it's about those people that can be there in those moments, you know, for the bad times and the good times that will actually be able to, you know, make incredible things happen, you know, and when those incredible things start happening for you, man, then you're just a happy person, man. It's just optimism everywhere. You know, you're not looking for the negative, you're looking for the positive because you've got those people helping you do it.
100%, mate. Couldn't agree more. So important.
So important, man. This has been amazing. I cannot thank you enough for jumping on board and letting everyone know how you're doing and how it all has been going for you. Am I going to get a cheeky ab shot? I think the world needs to see it because, like, man, I've been.
Oh, mate. Well, thank goodness we haven't had anything.
Thank God it's AM. Let me see him. Mate, look at that.
And with the Star Wars boxes.
Incredible, brother. I love it.
But no, thank you very much for having me on, mate. Like I see all the awesome content that you're doing, not only for your clients, but the information that you're putting out for everyone as well. And just spreading a good, healthy message about how bodybuilding can be done in a healthy, sustainable way. And I just think we need more people who are doing what you're doing, showing how this can be a part of a healthy life rather than the people who are doing the Dorian Yates, stuck in the dungeon, growling at everyone. So I just appreciate the positivity you're putting out, man. And like, if you ever want to have a chat again, I've had like so much fun today. So we'll have to do this again sometime.
We will absolutely do it again, man. And like you said, that's really what it's all about. You know, it's, you know, I don't want people to be on the far end of, you know, the Dorian Yates and like, you know, burning out and only being able to do 2 shows before they, you know, are so metabolically damaged they can't even like eat. But then on the other side, you know, I don't want people to think that it's, you know, it's dangerous and it's something that, you know, only specific people with specific coaches should be getting into and training that way and eating that way. You know, like we put too much pressure on coaches and, you know, other people, like just literally other people in your circle and, you know, to actually pay and do rather than taking your own initiative, you know, and just understanding that training's important, eating right is important, and that information is out there to make good, conscious decisions on those things. You know, it's out there, and the more we talk about it, the more it's going to sink into people. So thank you for being a part of that, brother. I really can't thank you.
Thanks very much for having me. We'll chat soon.
We absolutely will. Take care, mate.
See you, mate. Bye.